Hello, my name is Tristan Gold, and welcome to A Moment of Your Time. Joining me today is U.S. gold medalist and current ambassador to U.S. curling, Tyler George. Tyler, thank you for joining me today.
No problem, Tristan. Thanks for having me and giving me something to do.
Exactly. So, you said previously that you've been raised by curlers, with even your sister being a kind of high-level curling athlete herself. Was there any doubt in your mind, considering your family history, that you would go into curling growing up?
No. I when you're raised on a sport and literally in a curling club with my parents having run the club in Duluth, you don't really get a lot of option on that end, but it just kind of becomes part of you, like by osmosis too. So it was never a question I had. I was always excited to start playing. As a little guy, you're basically just waiting until you're large enough to get the rocks all the way down to the other end, as they weigh 42 pounds. But yeah, I feel very fortunate that I was raised in a curling community with such wonderful people, and there was no doubt that I was going to play just as soon as I was able.
Gotcha. Nice. And in multiple occasions, you've talked about this community feel that curling has. How would you describe the curling community to another athlete who hasn't experienced an environment like that?
It's kind of difficult to describe because I've never found anything like it anywhere else, not just in sports but in life. It's very like-minded people in that there's no cliques, there's no groups. It's everybody's one big family. So the division that you see in a lot of other sports, where if you've accomplished something, then you're allowed into a certain crowd, things like that. That's just not the way it is with curling. They everybody's accepting of everybody, and it's a wonderful group to be involved in for that reason, and it stretches all the way through your curling career from the first time you join up at a club to the elite level of the sport. You know, I've told the story many times that the Swedish guys that we played for gold at the Olympics, two of them were at my teammate's wedding the previous summer. We still play fantasy football with the Canadian guys that we played in the semis, and the Norwegian guys. I went to a bachelor party in Oslo for one of them. So, and these are the guys that we're playing against at the Olympics. So, I mean, it just stretches all throughout your entire curling career. And yeah, I've never found anything like that in any other sport or any other walk of life.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of the Swedish curling team, I know that right before your match, you actually FaceTime with one of the players. So it
Yeah,
was
that was an accident actually. It was the day before our game, and my teammate Matt Hamilton was, I think he was trying to FaceTime somebody else and accidentally hit Christopher Sundgren, his contact in his list. And then as long as we had him, we just decided to stay on the call and goof around for a little bit. So, but it wouldn't have been unusual for that to happen under normal circumstances. I don't think Chris was real surprised by getting that call. We probably wouldn't have had that type of contact with them by choice the day before the biggest game of our lives, but
right.
as long as you're there, it's like, oh yeah, well, might as well have a quick conversation, see how they're doing, and maybe psych them out a little bit in the meantime. Because as buddies, you can do that, and we definitely did that later in the same day. But yeah, that's again just a microcosm of the curling world as a whole.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. So you recently retired, but been working out during quarantine, as you mentioned in previous interviews. Is this for self betterment, or is this striving to a specific goal?
Uh, Pretty much just self betterment. It's really easy following retirement from competition to uh, lose your fighting weight, I guess you could put it, as boxers say. But yeah, you just feel better knowing that you're still taking care of yourself at the same time. And during quarantine, it's very difficult to do that, regardless. You know, if it, even under normal circumstances, as a retired athlete, I think most athletes still want to keep themselves in fairly good shape. And for me, that there's always that small chance that I decide I want to get back and play again too, which has not happened to this point. I'm happy with what I'm able to do for the sport off the ice, but in general, you just feel better knowing that you're taking care of yourself. And I think anybody would feel that way, regardless if they're an athlete or not. But I think it's a different mentality with athletes that they treat their body a different way, and they take pride in it. So uh, haven't always done the greatest job with that since. I think there's a little party that wants a break too, but yeah, for the most part, you feel better mentally knowing that you're taking care of yourself physically too.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah. And as an ambassador for U.S. curling, what are some ways in the future that you hope to promote the sport?
A lot of what I've done to this point is traveling around the country, especially to areas where the sport is relatively new. A lot of the southern states, the West Coast, places like that, where they're trying to develop the sport. And it's a lot of newer clubs that are looking to build their membership and their profile in their area. And the great thing with curling is that it's one of those sports that everybody is curious about when they see it in the Olympics. And if you actually get into a club and get on the ice and feel again that community aspect of it, it's an addictive thing to be involved in. So really, if I can help promote it just to get people in the building, if having an Olympic gold medalist show up helps drive people to show up for any kind of a learn to curl opportunity, or just a business organization want to do a team building exercise, and a lot of those clubs draw a lot of new members from that. And to have a platform because of what we accomplished, that I can do something to help promote the sport through these appearances, speaking engagements, learn to curl events, uh, just anything where if I show up it helps out, then I'm happy to do that. And that's definitely been the most meaningful part of what we accomplished to me, is that you have the ability to do something to help a sport and a community that's done so much for you. So to be able to give back in that respect, I would expect anybody in my position to want to do the same for curling. But I just feel very thankful that I'm the one that gets to do it.
Right, yeah, of course. And it's is there any like specific areas in the South that you've seen a lot of this kind of interest crop up, or is it just kind of like dotted all over the place?
Uh, there's a couple different regions. The Carolinas, North Carolina in particular, with Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, the Triangle Club that they have there. They've really taken off. Florida has had some clubs pop up now. Jacksonville, West Palm Beach, and Orlando. I've been to all those places. Hollywood Curling out in California, they're just getting their dedicated club this fall. I believe things have been slowed down, obviously, by the current state of affairs in the world, but that's kind of the jumping off point for clubs when they're able to get to their own dedicated facility. A lot of the new curling clubs around the country are sharing ice with figure skating rinks, hockey rinks, and the type of ice that you need for those types of sports is completely different from what you need for curling. Curling ice is really uh, cold surface. All ice is cold, but hockey ice and figure skating ice, like they zamboni it, like it's really flat and softer. It has to be for the skates to cut in. Whereas curling ice is really cold and there's little bumps on it. That's what the running surface of the stone grabs onto that makes it curl. So to try to make hockey ice into curling ice within like an hour is near impossible to get any kind of conditions that are good to play on. And uh, if you have your own facility where you can do your own ice all the time, it never changes from curling ice. You maintain it more like you would like a golf course, like a green fairway. Like it's very meticulous, and uh, the just having your own facility where you can hang out as members too. So whether you're not playing, you can go to the bar and have a beer. Like the Duluth Curling Club for me and for all other members, like that's like a second home as much as it is a place where we go to play. Especially for those of us that were raised in a club, but that you just feel like you're with your people there. And when you have a dedicated facility, then obviously that's going to draw more members, better conditions, a place of your own. Everything for the growth of the sport. So a lot of the things that I do deal with fundraising to try to get clubs into their own dedicated ice, so that uh, they can really have the sport take off in the area. And we're seeing exponential growth around the country, and we realize that a lot of that is because of what we did. And to see that firsthand for me, traveling around the country, and how fired up people are about the sport, even a couple of years following the games. We usually see that bump in interest, as I'm sure you've heard from a lot of other Olympic athletes, like that they always have those couple months like leading into and following the Olympics where everybody cares about their sport for a little while. And then it kind of trails off. And we've seen that every other Olympics, but because of our story and what we did now, it hasn't really trailed off. Like we're going to be able to continue this momentum into the 2022 games as well. And we didn't know if that would be the case because we've never had this happen before. So hopefully that continues on through the 2022 games as well. But uh, it's an unprecedented time of interest for our sport, and people are understanding why we love it as much as we do now, for all the reasons that we've talked about, with that sense of community and how addictive the sport is once you actually get out and try it too. People think from seeing it in the Olympics, because it's the only time they see it, that it's easy, that it's something anybody can do. We want people to think that anybody can play, and to a certain degree, you can, like golf. Anybody can do it, but there's a reason why we make it look as easy as we do. because this is the Olympics. These are the best in the world. So whenever people come in and try it for the first time, it's definitely a rude awakening where it's, yeah, this is not anything like what we expected. And that's great because we're getting more people out to try it and we're getting a healthy respect for the sport at the same time.
Right, sounds good. Actually, funny enough, speaking of upcoming fans and new people to curling in general, you found a unique ally in Mr. T during the Olympic time. I was wondering how your pep talk with him went before you guys actually hit up the ice for your final game.
Oh man, anything you think a Mr. T pep talk would sound like, that's exactly what it was. Like, we were ready to run through a wall after we talked to him, which isn't always a great thing in curling because you have to stay relatively focused and calm too. But we were able to channel that energy in a good way. But yeah, I actually recorded pretty much the entire call on my phone. I still have it to this day. But he had some of his old cliches in there, a lot of motivational stuff. He actually said at one point that he's not much for pep talks, which I think was just him being humble because it's Mr. T. I mean, anything he says is going to be a pep talk. And that was perfect for us because we had a little contact with him before that point, just because he was such a big curling fan on Twitter and was really helping the cause for us and getting people fired up about it. For a lot of reasons, like if Mr. T likes something, then yeah, we'll give it a look. So that was actually really helpful for us, and then we were fortunate enough to meet him after the games too at the Team USA Awards show in DC. So really cool to thank him for the support and the helping raise the profile of curling during the Olympics too. So a lot of strange things like that during the games, especially when you're not really used to it. All of a sudden, these celebs are coming out of the woodwork that are fired up about watching you, and it kind of turned from that ironic cheering that we saw in the previous games because our teams didn't do as well to a genuine interest. Like, people were really passionate and excited about what we were doing, and a lot of that came from us being relatively like everyman type of players. We don't look like the chiseled gods that you might see like from other sports. Doesn't mean that we're not fit, but when people look at the athletes competing, especially in the Olympics as amateurs, and say that those people are like us, it's really easy to when you're relatable to get people behind you, and I think I think a lot of people saw that, and it certainly helped get the bandwagon going. And you can hear everything that we say at the Olympics too because we're mic'd up. Imagine watching any other sport where you can hear them, which we see a little bit more of now during the pandemic, especially with golfers, that we can hear what they're saying, which makes for some very funny moments on the mic. And that should tell you how much we're able to control ourselves from having to do it in the past too. Mom's watching, so we got to be careful. But
Yeah, I was about to say I watched a little bit of the match itself, and I'm surprised that you guys got mic'd up for it. Was there any time where like you had to be cognizant of that, or like about to say something like, "Oh, gotta wait on that"?
we when we play in the major tournaments on tour, like the Grand Slams, the World Championships, things like that. Now our nationals is the same thing. We're mic'd up for all those games, so we're used to it. I flip ups early on when we were getting used to the mics being there, but yeah, for the most part, we're pretty good about maintaining a PG theme for the viewing. And I think there was enough of a delay during the Olympics too that if somebody did say something, that it was going to be uh, bleeped out or blacked out or something pretty quickly. But yeah, you don't really think about it after a while. It's just second nature. But that comes from having done it, thankfully. Had that been the first time that we'd had to deal with that, then it definitely would have been something that's on your mind. But it's a unique sport also in that the cameras that are covering you are basically on the sheet. Like, they can't walk on the ice, but there's little carpeted areas right next to it. So I mean, they're right up in your face, like pretty consistently during that. But it was something that we're used to. That's how curling is always filmed. So you're not thinking as much about the millions of people watching because those cameras are the same as they've always been. There's just a hell of a lot more people behind them than usual. But yeah, it was comfortable still. Yeah, to be honest, it is somehow, I don't know how we're able to do it to this day, but it just felt like a curling game. We knew in the back of our minds how important it was for us in our sport, but we were still able to keep that tunnel vision mindset of same rocks, same ice, same guys that we play all the time on tour. We were familiar with every team that was there. So just treating it like a curling tournament and trying to relax and be yourself and have fun with it, which we were much better at in the second half of the week than the first half. Uh, that's really what carries you through the Olympics. It's far more about who can perform on that stage than it is about who the most talented team is. And the talent has to be there, but can you do it when it matters? Can you have that tunnel vision and block it out? And I've heard other Olympic athletes say all the same stuff. Like it's not necessarily about how hard you work when you get there at the end. It's about, can you do it when it matters most? And that's what we were able to do.
Perfect. Yeah, and you actually mentioned in previous interviews that you played baseball and was even an all-conference pitcher, and you still obviously have a love for the sport. Was there a specific moment where you had to choose one sport over the other?
I think it was probably my sophomore year of college that uh, I really put the line in the sand. I think I knew what direction it was going the whole time. I don't know how far I could have taken baseball, but I knew what I was capable of doing with curling. Uh, so I went out for like the fall program my freshman and sophomore year of college and didn't end up pursuing it. And even at the point when I was playing juniors is 21 and under for curlers. I thought I had a legitimate chance at possibly winning a world championship as a junior. So I wanted to focus my energy on that. And to be blunt about it, the talent pool for that sport is quite a bit more shallow. You're competing against a lot more people when you're playing baseball. And that's something we like to tell parents when they're bringing their kids out to try curling too, is if you want your kid to compete for a national championship, play our sport. We'll help. We'll be the ones that are working with them, trying to help them get to that point. And the ability to work with elite players and uh, and have their attention and their help, and then combine that with how few athletes are actually competing, which is now changing. We're getting more participation, but you have a legitimate chance of trying to represent your country at the World Championships or the Olympics if your kid really decides they want to do this. So it's a big draw for us, and that was definitely a factor for me in making that decision. I still love baseball, obviously. The shoulder doesn't quite work the way it used to, as you may have seen with the first pitch attempt at the Twins home opener. Never going to live that one down, but
Yeah,
so
exactly.
bring up the all conference pitcher part, and I appreciate that. So people know, this is not because I can't throw the ball. It's because the old wing just doesn't do it anymore. But you refuse to believe that.
Yeah.
I had a good throw in me, and as soon as I got to this point and I was about to let go of the ball, I knew it was going to go bad. So
Well, you got
I still
redemption at the second pitch that you guys threw out, right?
it went a little better. Yeah, we each threw one at a time, which is far less dangerous, and that was at a minor league baseball game down in Omaha, the Storm Chasers, I believe it was for. And I actually got to do a third one in Altoona, Pennsylvania, during one of my tour stops for their Double A team. So uh, we've had some more practice with it now. I've found that if you throw from the bottom of the mound as opposed to the rubber, it's not necessarily the distance as much as it's that slope. Throwing the ball the first time from there is not the same as just throwing to somebody standing in front of you. So you can save yourself a lot of grief if you keep your feet off the rubber, let the pitcher have his spot and just throw from the front of the hill and maybe not, almost kill somebody in the process.
Perfect, yeah. And in previous interviews, you mentioned that when talking with other professional athletes, you all kind of treat each other on the same kind of level playing field. Is there a specific instance that comes to mind when thinking about this?
Um, yeah, there's a couple. One was when we got to go to the Minnesota Wild locker room. It was a couple weeks after the Olympics. We did the puck drop for the team, which they do very rarely apparently. So that was a huge honor. And they invited us to come down and spend some time in the locker room after the game. And it was the stars of the team, and they were just as geeked up to meet us as we were to meet them. Which that's kind of a shock to the system at that point. Like they're talking about how they watched your games and they were up in the middle of the night and things like that, and you're having a real one-on-one conversation with them, and you see that respect that people have when somebody's really good at something, when you have craft, you understand each other. And the cool part about that is that there's very few times, and we understand this now more to a lesser degree, but because of the attention that we've got, uh, there's very few times as somebody in the public eye that you really feel like you can be open and have a real conversation with who you're talking to. And for professional athletes like them, I mean, they're getting interviewed every single day of their lives. The attention that they get, we got a small taste of that for a while after the Olympics, and it feels like the walls are closing in on you. So, it's one of the few times that you actually get to open up and have a real conversation. And I think they appreciate being able to do that because they know we understand them, and they know that we're not looking to get anything from them. We're just looking to, hang out with a couple of other guys that are really good at something too. And when you have that common bond, you really can have some great conversations and some time where you're able to let your guard down and have a conversation that you wouldn't be able to have with somebody that hadn't accomplished something like that. People just don't understand what goes into it. So many of those types of interactions we've had. I had a great one with Darren McCarty, the former Red Wings legend, because we did a charity event together for the Red Wings Fan Day, where we had curling involved in it, which is really cool. And so I asked Darren because, again, only somebody like him would know the answer to this question. When we were ahead by 5 late in the game against Sweden, that really threw us for a loop. Like, it was the only thing that could have happened that could throw us off our game that we wouldn't expect would be something crazy like that happening. We had such tunnel vision for 7, 8 ends of the game where it's tight. We know what we're doing. We're just focused on our task. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, we're up by 5. Now you're just trying not to fall down or, make a mistake, which has never entered your mind to that point. But it's just something so crazy that you're basically on top of the podium right now. And you have to try to keep your focus in that position. And then all those thoughts creep in. And that's the part where the mental challenge really starts. So I had to ask Darren because when they won the Stanley Cup with the Red Wings, I forget what year, but they were in Game 7 and they were ahead a couple goals late in the game. And I asked him, Darren, what was going through your mind when you were that close and you had that big lead? And without hesitation, and I have to change the language so it's YouTube appropriate here too. You'll know what word I'm changing when I do it. He says, "Don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up." Like, that's immediately what came into his head. And that made me feel better, having been in that spot, like thinking some of those things. And that's a good thing to know, to tell our young athletes too, that, hey, those of us that succeeded in those positions still had those thoughts. It happens. Like, it's okay for it to happen. You just have to know how to deal with it and be able to laugh it off and move on and understand that those things may happen when you're in that spot. So it's not that you're trying to prevent it completely, as much as you have to be equipped to deal with it when it happens. And knowing that the best of the best in other sports thought the exact same things just reiterates that. So it was a really funny moment. Like, and again, that he thought he could be open about that too. Like, he probably wouldn't admit that in a normal press conference or interview, but to another person that was in that spot, it's like, yeah, I know what you were thinking. You know what I was thinking. So those interpersonal moments that you get with these athletes, it's really cool to be on that level where you get to share that.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. You mentioned it a couple times so far today, but your hometown of Duluth obviously plays a large role in your life. You've even mentioned that Duluth wants everyone to be celebrated. I'm curious if you can kind of like go more into that quote, because it sounds super interesting.
I think it's a Midwestern thing to a certain degree, that we really want to lift our accomplished people up on our shoulders because we know them. Like, we in this town, like, my family's been here for forever, and uh, the family name has been known around Duluth for far before I was here. And we have about 100,000 people, including the suburbs in the Duluth area. It's a big small town. Everybody knows each other. So when anybody accomplishes something, we want to celebrate it. And I've always felt that way about when things have happened with Duluthians before we did what we did. And I mean, you can look at the Minnesota Duluth men's hockey team, the national champions multiple times over now. They won their first title before we won our gold medal. And it was, if you saw any of those guys around town, a lot of them were local guys. that you really wanted to congratulate them because they brought attention to our town and they made us proud. And that just it's so much deeper a feeling when you really feel like you know the people. And I think Duluth has always felt that way. So coming back home, and having that celebration, having 500 people at our tiny little six gate airport, and just trying to fight your way through the crowds, to see your family, like it, that was unexpected too. We did not know that there was going to be that big a throng of people when we walked through those doors. And then having the celebration at the convention center with a couple thousand people crammed into this small space, and uh, holding brooms aloft like you're walking through, like for a ceremony. Uh, it's and seeing all these faces of people that you've known your whole life, and getting to share that with them. Like it's hard to talk about that and not get emotional still, because you remember, who helped get you there. That it's that saying, it takes a village. Like that's 100% true. I could fill up this entire interview naming people that helped us get to where we did from Duluth and our other hometowns. But uh, to bring that back home, to see the video coverage of uh, my curling club packed to the gills at 4 in the morning, singing the national anthem with their hands over their hearts, the same way that we were during the medal ceremony, and remembering where you came from and all the people that helped you get there. It's so meaningful, like just to, and again, to do it in a city like Duluth too. And I'm sure people would feel that way about their hometown wherever they come from. But just with the way that you really feel like you know everybody in this town, all they want is for you to be celebrated. It's not the same as it is like everywhere else we go, where there's certain people that kind of just want a piece of your time, or they're looking to put whatever they're doing on the map and associate with you. With here, it's just they just want you to be celebrated. They don't want anything out of it. They just want to tell you did a great job, and be done with it 10 seconds later if that's it. It's it still happens to this day. It's if you go around town every once in a while, it's somebody that you haven't seen will pop up, and they just want to tell you congratulations.
It's great. Awesome. Yeah, and I see that we are coming up to the end of our time, but I'd remiss to not mention both your liquor store and you're selling a special edition bottle of Malort, and I was curious to hear a little bit more about that, as it's kind of a unique liquor to kind of your area.
Yeah, it's we can't sell it in our shop
Hmm.
because it's not sold in Minnesota, unfortunately, or we'd have a whole rack for it probably. But so this Jepson's Malort liqueur, people from Chicago will definitely be familiar with Malort, but it's gained a cult following in the curling world just because if you've had it, it's a very unique flavor. So we've used it as a shot to take when you miss a shot in past fun tournaments, like not something that we do obviously in regular competition, but for charity events, things like that. And we were fortunate enough to become friends with the proprietor of this business, and I got to take a tour of the distillery where it's made down in Chicago, and we got to talking about doing a fundraiser for Project Joy, which is organization that the guy that took my place after I retired on John Schuster's team, Chris Plies, his father and his family started this organization years back, and it helps raise funds to feed underprivileged children in the Northland up here in the Duluth area and surrounding area. So our uh, charity curling tournament, the House of Hearts that we have, it's a pro-am in essence. Uh, that's the major donor for this foundation now, and the good people at uh, I'm forgetting the name of the distillery now, but CH Distillery down in Chicago that produce Malort joined up to do a special edition bottle that has the Olympic gold medal on it, and it says Gold Medal Curling Edition, and has the House of Hearts logo for our fundraiser on the back, and they're donating $5 from every bottle sold to go to help feed hungry children, which again during a time like this is incredibly important. So you can pick up those bottles online, uh, but yeah, again, we can't sell them at our shop, unfortunately. But yeah, great cause. I appreciate being able to bring it up, and I'm definitely going to have a few of those autographed by the team up on my mantle for quite a while now too.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming out and talking with me today. Is there anything else that you want to be promoting, or any sort of things, ways that people can find you?
Uh, no, I mean, if anybody gets bored and they want to find me on Twitter, I'm usually got a lot of time on my hands right now. Can't do much traveling for work, so I'm helping out at the liquor store, George's Liquor, up in the Kenwood Shopping Center. My father has now updated it to George's Gold Medal Liquor. I'm not much of a self promoter, but if it's something that's going to help the business, then that's all well and good. There's a big picture of us on the medal stand up on the front of the shop now too, which is a little strange to look at when you're walking into your business. But yeah, I'm there a couple days a week helping out. And other than that, just waiting for things to open up so I can get back on the road and get back to helping the sport.